What's up? Thank you for watching this very special final podcast. Today we have Night Sky Prince and Complex and Faraga Fighter. We're going to be making our Final Fantasy predictions. So let's get this thing started. Final Fantasy is having just an incredible time right now. We have one game that we know for sure, kind of. I mean, Final Fantasy 16 is gotta be at E3, right? It was announced last year, and then they had made the statement that we will see more early 2021. We got around. It's been about half of 2021. E3 seems like the perfect time to bring it out and show Final Fantasy 16. So let's talk about Final Fantasy 16 first. I'm thinking, do we get to see a story trailer, a gameplay trailer, or are we getting a release window? I'm going to swing this one over to Night Sky Prince, who had just released his latest E3 predictions YouTube video. Night Sky Prince, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, excuse me. With Final Fantasy 16, Naoki Yoshida had said that this is going to be like the busiest year of his entire career. And of course, he has Endwalker coming up. But that telling me that this is going to be the busiest year of his career is that it's more than just expansion year like previous years, right? So that tells me that he has something else in the cards that he's going to be delivering, and that tells me that Final Fantasy 16 is probably what's making it the busiest year of his entire career. I totally expect to see something from 16. Like not too long ago, Jason Schreier and his sources, which tend to be very reliable, said this game has been in development for 4 years already. So that's a really, really, really long time. When you look at some of the titles that Square has previously announced, looking back, like Final Fantasy VII Remake was announced 1 year into development. Uh, Versus 13 was announced before development even really began. It's been like a long running habit with Square to announce these titles just way before they should ever be announced. And now to think that 16 is like already 4 years in development, which I mean 4 years is like a complete dev cycle on its own right for mini games. So I mean, if we're looking at now that we're in like the fifth year of this game, I can only really see it coming in like 2022, the latest 2023. And yeah,
Mm,
it's the first.
mhm.
It's also one of the first games we haven't seen Square have like any. We haven't seen them have any like major issues, like oh we're switching the development team or we're switching the engine and stuff like that. And so this has all been like, from what we can tell, this has all been 4 years of actual development, which is exciting.
That's exciting. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
absolutely right, man. So 4 years, as you said, could that's could be a nice complete development cycle here.
yeah.
I mean, you said no later than 2023. I mean, it is very possible that we could see this game. I don't want to say this year. I don't want to say holiday. I don't want to say that just because
Mm.
I feel like that's being a little too optimistic. But it's possible that this game could be one of those things where they're like they learned their lesson, like you said. We're not going to announce games super early, and then maybe just be like, "Hey, coming this holiday." That would be just insane. I look ahead at the future of what Square Enix has to offer, and I'm like, okay, well, where does 16 fit in? I mean, if Origins is as they're saying, and we're going to get to that in just a second, Final Fantasy Origin, if what they're saying on that, that could be our holiday release, and Final Fantasy 16 could be our spring. They like to throw their games in their big releases in that spring, that March April window, like they did with Final Fantasy 7 remake. Um, and I can see Final Fantasy 16 kind of being a spring 2022 release. That's where I'm kind of putting it, and I think if I'm going to make my prediction about Final Fantasy 16, I'm gonna go ahead and say that I think we'll see a story gameplay trailer, more heavily focused on like the world of Final Fantasy 16 and what you're going to be doing, how the game's going to play, because we kind of got a little bit of that last year. We got this a little bit of the story, but we don't know enough. So I think we're going to get a nice detailed story gameplay trailer with a coming spring 2022. I think it's gonna end with coming spring 2022. And I'm gonna make my other prediction right now. It's gonna be at the Summer Game Fest. I think it's gonna be at the Summer Game Fest kickoff. And that's where that story gameplay trailer is
So
gonna
I
premiere.
don't.
And
Well,
yeah.
the thing is that I think they for Summer Game Fest, because what they showed off from the schedule, or at least what it looks like to me, maybe chat can correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure what I saw was is that it seems like at Summer Game Fest they're focusing on like the Crystal Dynamics IDOS stuff, like the Western titles, and then it seems like E3 is going to be reserved for the Japanese titles because the
Okay,
Summer
I'll
Game, yeah.
clarify that real quick. Let
Yeah.
me. I'll just kind of clarify that real quick. So, so Square Enix has their Square Enix Presents Summer 2021, and that is their own separate contained show, and that's the
Oh.
one where they were. Yeah, that's the one. It's like it's just the same thing as the Square Enix Presents Spring 2021, where they did their self-contained like Nintendo Direct style event. And it just falls under the umbrella of E3 Summer Game Fest. So it's their self-contained event. Technically, it's under the E3 banner. Um, and it's going to be that's the one where they're going to show off the Montreal studio, the Babylon's Fall, um, and they had no mention of Final Fantasy 16 in that little teaser. Of course, though, in the little presser, they said that expect some oohs and ahs, like expect the big reveals that, we're going to keep things under wraps for a little while
Ah, I
because that's
see.
what E3 is all about.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a potential that we'll see it at the Square Enix Presents. Absolutely a potential. Um, but the fact that it wasn't kind of mentioned kind
Hmm.
of gets me thinking like I think that this Summer Game Fest has its own show called the Kickoff, Summer Game Fest Kickoff. And it's basically think of it as the Game Awards in December. Think of it like that, or the opening night live for Gamescom. Think of
Right.
it like opening night live for Gamescom. It's its self-contained uh, press conference that's all inclusive with the entire industry, so anybody can show up and present something there. Knowing Jeff Cayley, I imagine that a lot of these games are going to be kind of indie. Like we'll have some indie game, mostly some indie games in there, and then big reveals, which I'll touch on a little bit later. But I have a feeling that that's what's going to happen with the Summer Game Fest kickoff. Is we'll see some indie games, big reveal indie games. Final Fantasy 16 is going to show up at the Summer Games Fest. That's my opinion. That's my prediction.
Mm.
What do you think? What do you think, Compo? I'm going to throw it over to you, Compo. What do you think about that? Final Fantasy 16. You got any thoughts?
So what I was gonna say was, uh, all we have to compare Summer Game Fest to was sort of their first impressions last year. And I don't know if you remember,
Hmm.
Summer Game Fest last year was kind of underwhelming. They started off with a bang,
Yeah.
with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. That was like the biggest announcement for the whole thing. And then everything else that happened for Summer Game Fest were like some interviews. And then, like, anytime a game was announced during that time period, it was automatically under the umbrella of Summer Game Fest. I don't know how different it's going to be this year if Jeff has any crazy connections that he's going to make. I think honestly, most of it is going to fall under the umbrella of E3, and then Summer Game Fest is sort of going to be more or less what it was last year. I'm honestly not expecting a whole lot from Summer Game Fest. As far as 16 is concerned, I think it's time we see more gameplay. We got a tease of it in the initial trailer, and we also got story teases. But I feel like we got more story than gameplay with that first trailer. So I would like to see
Hmm.
more gameplay. I'd like to see a little bit of a deep dive. I don't know if this is going to be like their big presentation, and I do find it curious when Square Enix made their post about their event that Final Fantasy wasn't mentioned. It was mostly Western games that seemed to be seem to be mentioned. Uh, which is interesting. So are they not going to have Final Fantasy there? Does Sony have full marketing rights to it? Because that is where we saw Final Fantasy 16 revealed,
Mm,
and that's where we've been seeing
yeah.
FF7 remake as well. Sony might have that locked down. In which case, what is Sony going to be doing? So I think it's time we see gameplay. That's what I want to see. What do I expect? I honestly don't know. It's just interesting what Square Enix has laid out so far about their event coming up soon. So I'm looking forward to see.
Yeah, man. That good point. Obviously, Sony hasn't made any kind of E3 or Summer Game Fest like announcements. Like they're not going to. They don't have any show planned as of right now.
Yeah.
So that kind of that has me thinking. Like I'm with you, compliment. It has me thinking, man. Either it's going to be at Sony or Summer Games Fest. Vinny, do you have anything you want to say about Final Fantasy 16 chat? Also, sound off Final Fantasy 16. Let me hear your thoughts.
So mostly just want some questions answered. The biggest one I want answered is like, is it going to be a solo or a multiple party member game?
Yeah.
I feel like around this time they can kind of release that information. That's what I feel like that releasing that information would help me with what to expect from the game more. Like if it's solo, I can kind of expect like, okay, our our protagonist is going to be the main focus of this game, and it's not going to be like Final Fantasy VI where you have like 14 different people's stories going on. Um, or like Final Fantasy X, you have everybody's part of the same party, they all have the same goal, but there's so many different um, stories going on. And but if this is like the first Final Fantasy solo party, that would be interesting because we would have our ideas of what to expect, but we also don't know what to expect because it hasn't been done on a main line before. So I would like that question answered. Um, Also, as far as release, that really depends on what Final Fantasy VII remake has planned. Because I don't know, like I don't think they have anything planned for the holidays, but they might. They might have like another Intergrade style thing planned for holidays. And whatever 7 remake has planned, I don't think 16 is gonna want to be in competition with that release.
Agreed.
Because I mean, once I get a PS5, I'm obviously going to get both, but there are people out there who are probably going to have to choose one or the other, and they
Hmm.
probably don't want 16s.
Right, you don't wanna
Um,
compete with yourself.
exactly. You don't want to be your biggest competitor. So if
Mhm.
Remake has stuff planned for the holidays, like another Intergrade, um, then or if Remake has something planned for next spring, like another Intergrade or Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, I don't think they would release 16 and Remake Part 2 within the same time frame.
No.
Mm.
Right, right, yeah, and that's I'm on the same wavelength. You have to look ahead kind of at this and figure out where Square Enix is dropping things. So if Final Fantasy VII Remake would, in my opinion, I think part 2 is probably maybe holiday 2022, you know what I mean? Like depending on what their scope is on here. So I think if you get it out of the way, I think 16 is way closer. I think
Yeah.
16 is way closer than remake part 2. Or anything
That
like integrate is kind of their thing here. And then
was
I feel like we're going to see next year holiday we'll maybe see some Final Fantasy 7 remake part 2. Maybe spring 2023 is where I'm feeling like
I,
that's gonna nestle in.
I feel that
Um,
depends
and then for
on
fun,
I feel that depends on how far they want to take Remake Part 2. Like if Remake Part 2 ends in June, then
exactly.
they might be done with it by spring. If Remake Part 2 ends,
Yeah.
in Rocket Town, then yeah, maybe, holiday of 2022. It all depends on where
Yeah.
they want to break it off.
Mm. Well, thinking
It's
back, and this goes all the way back to like when Remake was like first announced, or when they first announced that it was going to be multi-part. Kitase had compared the releasing structure to Final Fantasy 13's releasing structure, where it was like every 2 years that we got a Final Fantasy 13 game, plus or minus. And so if they're trying to emulate that same releasing structure that they had with the 13 trilogy, which was actually a pretty decent releasing structure, it felt like all those games came out one after the other. So, and they all made it within one gen, which is crazy because Square can't normally do that. So if that's what they're trying to do, then logic would hold that Q4 2022 would probably be when we see Remake 2.
I'm feeling it, man. I'm feeling that too. And then if you think about if that's the case, Final Fantasy 16 would make more sense than ever to come out this holiday. So that way you get a whole year of Final Fantasy 16. Like and you know what I mean? I just feel like that's kind of crazy talk, right? To
Mm.
think that Final Fantasy 16 could
Well,
come out this holiday.
the problem
Um,
is though
but
they'd have to market all of that in 6 months, and what I've noticed is that they usually because there are some exceptions like Neo Twiwi, but normally I feel like they want like a full year of marketing before they launch.
mm,
See, Dark Souls has always been. I always talk about Dark Souls if you guys hadn't noticed. Um, Dark Souls did extremely well with like minimal marketing and like they'll be like they'll make an announcement and be like, "Hey, guess what? Dark Souls 3 is coming out in 3 months." It's like, "Oh my God, what? This is the first we're hearing about this." Like, it.
and you saw the buzz, right? Like when they
Mhm.
do that kind of thing. And this could be Square Enix trying something new, you know what I mean? To jump it. Like if you get 6 months of promotion, I feel like that's actually a sweet spot, really. In my opinion, I
Yeah.
feel like that's sweet because the buzz hasn't worn off and but it's only building. And after about 6 months, the buzz is either like it's still building or you're still gonna have to trick out some more information. But like Fallout did the same thing at one time where it was like, hey, it's going to come out soon, very soon, and then boom, there it is. Like when games do that, there's a buzz, man, and then it gets exciting. People want to run out and get the
Yeah.
game.
People are
Um,
when you do
so
that, people are
like,
like, "I never knew I wanted this until now," and then they go out and get
yeah,
it.
right. I gotta go out and get amiibo.
What I do want to
Sorry.
say,
Yeah.
sorry to interject here, but what I do want to say is I agree with that observation that Square is handling 16 a bit different. They're not announcing it years in advance. They announced it very
Mhm.
recently. We're assuming they're not announcing it years in advance.
Right.
If it was coming out this holiday, why was that not a headline for their E3 announcement that they were going to
It's
be
true.
showing off 16? I'm looking at the post on Twitter right now, and it says world premiere from Eidos Montreal, Babylon's Fall, Life is Strange: True Colors, and Marvel's Avengers. No Final Fantasy
Shoot.
listed on there, which is
Also,
interesting.
So I'll say this
well, you
much
also
about
think though.
yeah.
Okay. No, I was just gonna say that there's gonna be a you gotta think if they did a spring, Square Enix presents spring, Square Enix presents summer, Square Enix presents fall, and you can imagine that if they're gonna do a Square Enix presents fall, they can make that the headline. Like, hey, here we go with full hands-on gameplay of Final Fantasy 16,
And
and
then
then
like
that will be
1
their
month or
big
2 months in advance,
focused.
like then
Yeah, yeah,
release
there
the
it is, and then
that'd be insane, but I don't know how I don't know if that's how they're gonna decide to handle this. That's interesting.
Mm.
right.
Yeah. They never usually announce like when the big Final Fantasy is going to be there. Like the state of play when Remake got re-revealed, it was May 2019. When
Yeah.
that happened,
Mhm.
they never said that yeah, we're going to be talking about, even though the game was already announced, because that's the surprise that this thing was going to be
Well, they
coming
did
back.
say at the end of that, like, that return trailer that more to come in June, and then
Mm.
in June when E3 was happening, we saw, uh, Remake,
Right.
Right.
in its full glory, so that they did sort of tease that we were gonna be seeing more, but that was at Sony's event.
Mm.
And maybe that was
Mhm.
just a special case for Remake and that they wanna keep 16 a surprise. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this about
Yeah.
Naoki Yoshida. If he knew that like people were like expecting it and it wasn't going to be there, he's the type of guy to just be like, It ain't like it's not happening. Yeah, he's straight up that type of guy to be like, don't have high, like it's not happening. Or yeah, so he's very upfront.
Yeah,
And someone in chat also mentioned too about 16 potentially coming out like in the fourth quarter of this year, is that you also run into Inwalker releasing
Endwalker.
it in
Yeah,
November.
have that too. Yeah.
So Square's
That's
in a
true.
tight spot because no matter where they
No,
go,
right? Isn't
they have to
that
compete with themselves, and so it's tough. What do they do?
I think what they do is
Good
they don't
point.
release 16 this year. They release it maybe
Spring.
spring 2022.
Hmm.
Leave the fall to Endwalker. I mean, 14 is massive. So having that be the holiday title, quote unquote, like let that be. Let that be its own thing for
Yeah.
this year, and then release 16 spring 2022.
I'm yes, exactly. Yeah, perfect. Endwalker being the quarter four or not the quarter four, the holiday release, and then 16 being the spring, and then remake part two being the holiday 2022. Come on, guys,
I
let's
no,
go.
I
We
think
go. So
remake
let's go
part
over to
sorry, I think remake part 2 is like, spring 2023 at the soonest,
spring
honestly.
2023.
I
Yeah,
like to think
we'll
about it
keep it
though,
in the spring. They like that little spring area.
2023. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we also actually, first of all, before we move on from 16, I'd like to think I think this would be a fun thing to do. Like just your like solid locked in prediction here. What do you think we're going to see from Final Fantasy 16? I'll start. I think, like I said, I think it's going to be we're going to get a nice in-depth world like trailer. So like you'll get to know the different locations, a little bit more about what the story is going to be about, and we'll close it out with some gameplay. And then at the end, it'll go black screen, spring 2022. That's my prediction.
Okay.
Let's go over to Vinny. Solid locked in prediction right now.
I think that I think that it is probably this is just my gut feeling. I feel like Final Fantasy 16 is closer to the horizon than Spring 20. Would you say 2022? Um, I think that we are going to have probably more gameplay, uh, where it's um the variety of weapons and possibly the variety of magic, how battles are going to take place, how our character is going to look in like real gameplay world, and it's I feel like it's going to be probably the holidays, probably going to come out around Christmas time. Enough time for people to experience Endwalker and then like move on to like their console experience with Final Fantasy 16. So winter of 2021.
Ooh, all right, I love it. Night Sky Prince. Solid locked in prediction for Final Fantasy 16.
Okay, well, here's what I think is gonna happen, man. I'm really thinking that for a trailer, we're gonna see probably some story, some gameplay. I hope we see a girl, just in general. We there's there's just there's just too much testosterone right now. We need to see a girl. Um, and
Mhm.
for a release date, I'm thinking a little bit later than everyone else. I'm thinking like Q4 2022, and then I'm thinking like remake will be like 2023 actually.
Yeah,
I think
All
I
right.
think
I can see
that
that.
yeah.
Feel that. Feel that. That's good. That's a good prediction there. And also talking to you or hearing your voice there, Night Sky Prince, just brought back memories of Chocobo jousting and like just would really love to see some Chocobo jousting, some
Yeah.
mounted combat, the
Yeah.
medieval tournament
No, I still think that I still think
mini games.
Chocobo jousting is a great idea. Like,
That would be
Right.
fun.
Uh Compo, real quick, solid locked in prediction for you.
Uh, I think we need to see gameplay. Exactly who we're gonna be playing as. Is this gonna be? Are we just playing as one person? Is there gonna be a party? What other characters? And then after that, we get maybe a new story trailer, giving us a bit more of a an outline for how the story is gonna play out about the world, like you mentioned. I basically what you said, Daniel, but like reverse, like with the story, a story trailer closing it off. Um, I am more on this side as far as release. I'm more on the side of NSP. I think it's gonna come out uh in 2022. I don't think Q4 2022 is a bad choice. I think it might come out then. Spring could come out. It depends on what we see this year. I don't think it's going to come out this year. I think just bringing up Endwalker like officially convinced me that it's not coming out this year because I feel like it'd be conflicting with that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the expansions for 14 are pretty long. So, yeah, I would see it coming out in 2022. And depending on what we see and the way it looks this year will sort of help us gauge exactly when next year we can see it. But I do think it'll give us at least a year. I think it will say 2022. I don't know if it'll specify when, like a season or a specific date, but it will say 2022.
Okay.
That's what I'm going with.
I like it. All right. So I think the general consensus here is that we will see Final Fantasy 16 at E3. That's what we're thinking. That's what we're feeling
Good.
there. Another game that was rumored, and it's very strongly rumored at this point. This is coming from Fanbyte. We're saying that Final Fantasy Origin. This is a Souls-inspired Final Fantasy game developed by Team Ninja, which is the same guys that did Neo. So I guess we should technically be saying Neo-inspired Final Fantasy game. So I mean, here we go. This is all Vinny right here. I mean, Vinny is our Soulsborne extraordinaire. Loves the Soulsborne games. If this is not a match made in heaven for you, Vinny, I don't know what is. You know what I mean? Final Fantasy and Dark Souls type games coming together to make this game. So another thing I want to say before we get started with this one is that there was also talks of a demo going to be released on the PlayStation 5 store, which is even more incredible because that means this game is almost ready. This game is a lot further along than we had even anticipated, even though before we even knew it existed. Right now we know it exists, and there's a demo that's going to be released according to the site. So, Vinny, Final Fantasy Soulsborne style game, Final Fantasy Origin, rumored to be set within the world of Final Fantasy 1. Are we getting a retelling? What are we seeing at E3 or Summer Games Fest?
Well, hopefully, if they follow like the Dark Souls formula, a lot of it would be backtracking. So, um, you know how in Final Fantasy you have places that you can't go because you need some specific type of transportation. Well, Dark Souls does a similar thing, um, except instead of forms of transportation, it's like start off in area one, and it's kind of think of Dark Souls as like it's very Dark Souls is very tall, so
Mm.
you have gates that are locked or things that you can't go through, um, but everything is interconnected like a web. And so if Final Fantasy Origins is like that, instead of like modes of transportation that would get you to the next place you need to be, it would be more um, eating certain bosses that or you collecting
Mm-hmm.
enough whatever the in-game currency would be, collecting enough of the in-game currency to get a crest or something that would open a locked gate. Um, One thing that like Dark Souls had that was super successful was familiarity. So Dark Souls was basically one, like it was like preloaded, just one long game where
Mhm.
you could basically, like, if there were no cutscenes, you could basically get through the whole game without having a load screen because the entire world was
Mm.
connected. And so um like you would be able to see your next location or future location um before actually getting there, and then
Right.
being there you'd be able to look back and see where you've been. And in the world of Final Fantasy 1, through like a recent, playthrough, it it's I'm curious to see how they're going to structure that, because 1
Mhm.
is fairly small. And so you're asking.
Well, if it's Soulsborne, like, like I get, well, Neo is where I guess we really should be going with it. But if it's kind of Soulsborne, it could also, in effect, it could also be like Fallen Order, like Jedi Fallen Order. Like,
Mm,
that's kind of a Soulsborne inspired game. So it doesn't necessarily need to play exactly like a Soulsborne.
well, so
And if you go
so
with the
uh,
Fallen Order style type gameplay, you
I
got a lot
I
of backtracking there. Metroidvanias, basically,
I feel like
with Soulsborne combat.
Soulsborne gets thrown around um so so loosely nowadays because of how popular Dark Souls is. And so
Yeah.
people say Fallen Order is a Soulsborne game. Um
No, no, it's Soulsborne inspired.
Inspired. Well, it's not, yeah, not
Inspired.
made
And
by them, but
that's where
inspired,
I'm going with.
but
Yeah.
basically
Inspired. Like the combat is inspired by Soulsborne.
So I got a question. As somebody who
Yeah.
is, I've played Fallen Order, but I'm not into the Soulsborne genre. I never played them. And I never played Neo. I want to know, because this is Team Ninja that is rumored to be making this game. So if anything, I feel like we could pull more from Neo. What are the differences
Right.
between I have more of an idea what a Souls game is like than Neo. What are the differences there? Are they similar? And what can we expect from a Neo type game? And then what can we sort of expect them to do different in a Final Fantasy type Neo game to not make it the same?
well, so
Right.
first, I feel like Neo was a lot easier. It was more user friendly. It wasn't so I guess abrasive, but like, difficulty wall. That so I feel like Final Fantasy Origins would take that from Neo, as far as um like being more forgiving to the player. Because
Yeah.
that's, if you ask anybody who stopped playing Dark Souls, usually they say, I couldn't get past the whole, like, it was just too difficult. It wasn't my thing.
Mhm.
Um, so maybe they'll be more forgiving in Final Fantasy Origins, because from past experiences, most Final Fantasies, most mainline ones, are relatively easy. Um, Super early, you could break the game on most of them. And as far as like it being Soulsborne inspired, I mean, most people say things are Soulsborne inspired if it has a dodge roll. And I mean, Dark Souls is a lot more than just dodge rolls.
You
Um,
could say Horizon is a
Yeah.
Soulsborne game, but it's not at all.
yeah.
Soulsborne.
And all you do is dodge roll in that game.
Um,
So
the To me, what makes
Yeah,
oh,
I think it'll be definitely a more accessible approach.
what makes
Yeah.
things like Soulsborne inspired is more of the intricacy of the leveling up system and how things scale. So like in the Soulsborne games, like you get to level your stats how you want, and then that lends to your play style. Um,
Mm.
so uh, being able to like play as one character, and then I guess, like, you have like your generic warrior of light, and then you can go strength and be like a monk. You could go kind of like dex and strength and be more of a warrior. You can go like full dexterity and be. So I think
Mhm.
that would be a cool, like, you have like one warrior of light, and then how
Mm.
you level up that warrior of light is how his job class ends up being. So you get to
Yeah.
and you could probably, like red mage, white mage. I don't know why you would want to do white mage, but
Multiplayer aspect would be pretty sweet now that I think about it. Like,
well,
like to be able to have like a team of 4,
if you take,
just like in the original.
I feel like the multiplayer aspect of Dark Souls would lend itself very well to Origins because you have people who can be with you, and then you have people who invade you. So like that multiplayer aspect, I feel like works for that Soulsborne genre where you multiplayer multiplayer is at like, so it's PvE VEP, but it only happens if you want it to happen. So
Mhm.
the option, having that option is nice, and you know just being able to play with your friends in like a Final Fantasy setting has always been something I wanted to do. And I'm not talking about like
Okay.
Cydia.
I'm gonna leave the call and come back because it looks like I'm sputtering a little bit. But I'm just gonna ask you, besides like how we think it's going to play, what do you think we're gonna see at E3? Like, do you think we're gonna see like, are we getting the trailer? Are we getting the gameplay or a demo? How's this thing gonna go? And I'll be right back. I'm gonna jump out and jump back in.
All right. Well, since you said that there's a demo, I would say that we'd probably see a lot of gameplay. Probably like demo gameplay, and then a release date for the demo. That would be on PS5 because I mean that demos to me are probably the best marketing because demo kind of lets you know if the game is for you or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, from my understanding, the demo is something that they had started with Neo actually, or at least Team Ninja had started with Neo. It's something that they'd done previously, and it's actually like an early like alpha build. And they put this demo out to in order to be able to get feedback and then implement that feedback into the final product. And that's actually the end goal with this. It's a lot similar to almost like what Square has done with Project Triangle Strategy, where they did a feedback demo. And that seems to be what this rumor is indicating about this demo is that it's going to be a very much a feedback demo, like the devs telling you, hey, we got a very early build, this experimental type of game. We want the audience to play it first and to give their feedback on it so we can make all the tweaks that we want to do. So that's what it seems like to me, which tells me that this game is still probably a year and a half
Hmm.
away from being released. That being said, I do think that we're going to see something interesting of it. What I find most curious about Final Fantasy Origin is that they say that the Tetsuya Nomura is supposed to be doing the character designs for it, and I'm just trying to imagine him doing like Final Fantasy 1, maybe Souls Neo-esque designs, and I'm just like, that's very far out of his out of his comfort zone, or at least the way we think of his comfort zone with the way that he designs stuff now and the titles that he designs for. So seeing him do something like that is going to be interesting because I don't think he would have actually been my first pick for uh this type of game. I think it's
I
Yeah.
kind of interesting that they went with him.
Yeah, that is interesting. You just see a lot of medieval inspired design and then a lot of belts. So
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Go on.
I was just gonna say, as far as what we're gonna see this year, I think we're gonna see a trailer, a pretty typical trailer. Spliced cutscenes and gameplay. They're gonna show a bit of how the game works, and then, like Nice Guy Prince said, we're gonna get the announcement at the end of the trailer that there's a demo out now, sort of like a prologue, a test, give feedback, sort of like how they've done with other Square games, and we might not see it until next year. It again, to reiterate about Endwalker, that's going to be their big holiday release, and then somewhere in 2022, 16 is going to release, and this, and it's going to be separate. So I think that's how it's going to play out. I don't think it's going to be like a massive, like, we're focusing on this for this show. this is our big game that we're showing off. I think that's going to be more like 16. But there's going to be a decent enough trailer that's a few minutes long that's going to give us an idea of what we can get and announcement of the demo.
All right. I like that. For me, I'm going with the announcement of a demo, and I'm going with a holiday 2021 release. I think it is a different enough game to stand out from Endwalker. Endwalker is also,
Yeah.
you gotta be part of that MMO subscription and everything. I feel like this is a completely different genre. They can do it. I think they can pull it off. Different development team, everything. So going to go with holiday. I think the demo is to test it out to make sure we're ready to go for holiday, and we're going to be good, man. I think we're going to get it. We're going to move on from now. Those were the Final Fantasy games that we were kind of like those two games, Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy Origin. They're heavily rumored to be part of the E3 or Summer Games Fest. And also, go ahead and say it. It's good. Maybe both Summer Games Fest kickoff. I just feel like one of them will be at the Summer Games Fest kickoff, and I'm going with just one of them, I guess. And yeah, and we don't know what Sony's doing, so we can't say it could be at a Sony conference. I will bring up Xbox a little later on, but it won't be for those two games since they are, I guess, rumored to be. Well, Final Fantasy 16 is a Final or a PlayStation 5 exclusive, and then
Yeah.
Origin is rumored to be a PlayStation 5 timed exclusive as well.
I will say
Um,
the pattern usually is with Sony
mhm,
is that they announce state of plays during the week, and it
mhm,
usually falls on a Thursday. I don't
mhm.
know how that would work
Yeah,
this week, but if they do, we could expect an announcement on Monday or Tuesday and have a show this Thursday like that quickly.
it's
Uh,
possible. You're right. You're
so
very
I,
right.
I
Very
don't
true.
know if that's gonna happen, but if that does happen, I think we could expect to see uh, these games there, even over the actual Square conference, since it's not even a highlight. Final Fantasy is nowhere mentioned in that post that
Yeah,
they made. We could see Sony just flexing that marketing right and just and showing those games there. So we'll see. That's a possibility. I'm not saying that's actually gonna happen, but something to keep in mind.
that is a very good point. Yeah, you're right. They do announce it beginning of the week and then on Thursday, so it's very possible. If they do that, it will fall on the same day as Summer Game Fest kickoff.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's okay. I mean, make it a big day. Everybody's paying attention anyways. Could work.
What
I
time is
am very surprised we haven't seen anything from Sony at this point. I know we just got their state of play for Horizon Forbidden West. And that was their big deal. But I feel like this is E3 week or E3 week, Summer Game Fest month, whatever you want to call it. It's the season, and I feel like Sony will be coming out with something soon, like some kind of announcement of a state of play or a show. But
Yeah. What I will
um,
say, I just looked it up on Twitter. The Summer Game Fest kickoff event is at 2 p.m. Eastern on
yes,
Thursday, and Sony usually, like, for the last few state of plays have been at 5 Eastern.
look at
So
that. It works,
it,
man.
it,
It
it can
just
work,
works.
yeah.
Oh man, awesome. Okay, so we're gonna move on to some more like not obscure Final Fantasy predictions here, but let's get them out of the way. We just had Final Fantasy VII First Soldier. The beta is ongoing right now. We've played a little bit of that one. I do not think we're going to see much, or if any, I don't know. We might see something just to say, hey, the beta was successful, or something from Square Enix, and look forward to maybe a release date, like in a solid locked in release date,
Yeah.
if anything at all. So I'm gonna kind of move on from First Soldier, and just say that, leave it at that. Are you guys cool with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And then we're gonna go over to Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Now this is confirmed to be a 2022 launch. It's for mobile games or for mobile devices. Do you guys think we're gonna see any Ever Crisis from Square Enix this E3 or this event? Do you think we're gonna see anything?
Um, I think we saw pretty much everything they wanted us to see about Ever Crisis. Um,
For now,
for
right?
now, I mean, we basically know what it is. I mean, it's the compilation tied into one. So anybody who's followed the compilation basically knows what to expect. And then we also saw how it's kind of like top down, and then goes into like remake style graphics when you get into a battle. Personally, I feel like we know everything we know about Ever Crisis as of right now. So I don't know if they're gonna really use a time slot for that.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. So yeah, Ever Crisis I think is kind of a just if anything, maybe we see like I don't know Advent Children. Like people are really wanting to see how that's going to be played in Ever Crisis. I don't know
Yeah.
how they're gonna even be doing the release schedule of it. If it's going to be intertwined or if they're just going to knock out the original first. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we gotta.
So
So,
oh,
go ahead, NSB.
well, I was gonna say, normally with the releasing of mobile titles,
Mhm.
they tend to be closer to a shadow drop than like an
Right.
official like release and a traditional like marketing buildup that you'd see for a console game where there's like this steady buildup. Normally, like maybe like a month or even a couple of weeks before release, they'll just say, "Hey, it's coming on this date. Pre-register now," and then
Boom.
that'll just be like that's it.
That
Yeah.
That's the marketing.
not
That,
not
that
Traditionally
sounds about
speaking,
right.
that's been what Square has done. In terms of like how the gameplay for this thing is gonna look, and I said this yesterday when I was talking to Blitz. I'm calling this right now. It's going to be unit based instead of being like you have like the same party that you would throughout like each game. The reason
Yeah.
I say it's going to be unit based, don't misunderstand. I know that it's the same type of monetization that Opera Omnia uses, where it's just costumes and it's just weapons.
Yeah.
But in order to make a turn-based combat system work, you need more than one party member, and you're not going to have that for some of these games. Like you're not going to have
Yeah,
that for Crisis Core
I was gonna
Story.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not gonna have that for probably most of Advent Children's story retelling.
Dirge.
Yeah, or Dirge, right?
Mhm.
So, what I think is gonna happen is that you're gonna get units that are throughout like basically the Final Fantasy VII series. And in order
Mhm.
to make that gotcha system work, you'd have to be able to use the same party members across all of those games. Otherwise, you have multiple different gotchas going where you're pulling weapons for units that you can't even use in certain games and such. And so the only way to really make that work is to have it so that you can sort of build your FF7 All-Stars team with Cloud and Reno and Kingdom Hearts Sephiroth.
Throw in Noctis. Yeah, why not? Let's just
and
throw them all
Oh,
in
dude,
there.
and
dude, of course. I mean, like that's also a potential too that they'll throw in like Squall or Emmett Selk or something crazy in there
Yeah.
where you can like where you'll have like different like Final Fantasy characters that come in as like guests and stuff too.
Yeah, if it's
So
contained within the battle, like if it's just contained
Yeah.
within battle like Opera Omnia did, and then after that you're back to your regular story, like you're back to there's an altered story, like you're not going to see Emmett Celt in the storyline, like but you'll see him in battle if you want to. I mean I guess
yeah,
if you
yeah,
got to
and
make your
that's
money, so that's fine.
and
that's what I'm thinking, right? Because
Mhm.
we've already seen like Aerith like in like
We did
Mako Reactor
exactly.
1, right?
I said the same thing and everybody was calling me out like because I kind of already like I talked about this in my reaction video with it and everybody was calling me out. I was like, oh no, that's just a nod to the first demo. And I was like, yeah, I know that's the first demo had Aerith and then Tifa was in the party for but I'm like, I really think that it's gonna be Opera Omnia style where you can just bring in different unit. I'm totally with you on this one. I
Yeah.
kind of said it in my reaction video too.
Yeah.
So
and
Does that
we're
mean
on the
you
it,
same
don't
page.
lose Aerith though after she dies? Like,
She can
you
still battle with you in spirit, sure. If you
yeah.
well,
You'll have like an Aerith Spirit EX unit or some shit.
yeah,
and
That's what they'll call it.
it
Or yeah, but yeah, she'll just still show up as a unit. You'll have Zidane in there. It'll be great, man.
and if I remember correctly, the Ever Crisis is completely free, right?
yes.
So
Free to play. Yeah.
so that's usually with these free to play games, they don't waste money on marketing, and the game
That's true.
itself is the
You
marketing.
don't even. Yeah, you don't need to market Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Like,
Yeah, it,
yeah, you just need to show a trailer and say, "Here it is, Shadow Drop, boom,
yeah,
get it."
and the microtransactions are what they're trying to sell. The game is the
Yeah,
advertisement, and it's like, like maybe they'll say like, hey, 9.99 Aerith pack where you get Aerith and then her like a good weapon for Aerith and like a good armor for Aerith for like 9.99,
sure.
and you get a
Mhm.
million people to buy that, and you just made $10 million. And like it all through the microtransactions. So like for these games, like the game itself is the marketing. Like they release it because it's free to play. You don't want to waste money on the marketing. And then the microtransactions are what makes the money for the game, and people are gonna get it because it's Final Fantasy VII. So,
Oh yeah,
That's a
right.
good point.
I
Yeah.
mean, and then like just like that, I mean, you kind of already have my money. You know what I mean?
hmm
Oh,
Because I'm going to be
absolutely.
buying. I'll buy those packs if I can play with like a team of, I don't know, Noctis, Cloud, and whatever. I guess I like it, but I also would. I really hope they do a kind of like traditional and then a kind of I don't know, Ever Crisis mode or something. You know, just give me like a traditional where I can go through it the way it's supposed to be played, or I guess give me the option to not have
well, I
those
think I,
characters.
I think
They
it's
don't make money that way,
I
so.
think it's a Brave Exodus that tells you the recommended characters to use. Like if you have like
Mhm.
if you're gonna go play through a level, it says like if you have Auron recommended for Auron, recommended for Tidus. Like I think it says like stuff like that. So
Yeah.
they might have something like that. Like for for the best type of blend, use Aerith, Cloud, and Tifa for this level. For the best
Okay.
dialogue or something, like something similar to that. Or you could just say like, nah, screw it. I have 4 different clouds and 4 different costumes, and I'm just gonna have an army of
I'm just gonna go
clouds.
all cloud. Let's go. It's
Uh,
gonna be a cloudy day. We're gonna go over to this one's. I want to talk about this one because we can move on from Ever Crisis because this is the E3 Summer Games Fest prediction show. So let's get on with the predictions rather than the what we think the games are going to be about. Here
Ready.
we go. Chocobo GP. I'm bringing it back. You know what I mean? This game was trademarked earlier this year. I believe back in February, if I'm not mistaken. It was trademarked, and we never saw anything from it. And the funny thing is that the month before, First Soldier and Ever Crisis were trademarked, and then like a month later or a couple months later, you get the announcement. But we haven't seen anything on Chocobo GP, and I'm just kind of excited about it. The fact that it could be a remake of the Chocobo Racing PS1 game, or it could go the mobile route. It could do any of those things. It's not. It's maybe even unlikely that it will be at the show. I just feel like since it was trademarked recently, that they're ready to drop something. What do you guys think about Chocobo GP? Do you think we're going to see it at E3?
I would
No.
I would like to see it. I would like to see it
I
at
love
E3.
it. No.
I I would like to see it at E3 because I feel like it would fill the hole that like I love Crash Team Racing and
Mhm.
games like that. It's just like it's just fun to play the characters outside of their like realm, and just
Yeah.
having like a Mario Kart Crash Team Racing style Final Fantasy where everybody's riding on different colored chocobos and stuff. Like I feel like that would be a
Good
fun
man.
same couch console experience for people who love Final Fantasy and just want to like have
And
fun.
like Mario Kart is like one of the top selling games of all time. You know what I mean? Let's capitalize that on it. Let's mix some Final Fantasy with some Mario
Oh,
Kart.
they should
Let's get
make
it
a
going.
they should make Final Fantasy Party where it's like Mario Party style Final Fantasy.
I mean, let's just take all of the Nintendo Mario IP and then just put Final Fantasy on it. Like, literally, can we please get a Final Fantasy Dissidia Super Smash Brothers? You know, what I mean, like,
Yeah,
let's get the platform fighter Final Fantasy and make it fun. You know,
Yeah, I expect it to be a little more like Mario Kart Tour. I think it's a mobile game that
mm,
yeah, I don't think it's a console game, man. I think it's a free
mm.
to play mobile game. I think that's all it is. I didn't even hear about it until now, and I just it sounds like a mobile
It's got
game.
well,
mobile written all over
It's
it.
well
just yeah, exactly.
they
So
trade
that's all I can see it being.
They trademarked it the same time they trademarked First Soldier, right?
It was like a month, or it was about a month after or something like that. It was
So
around the same time. So it
so
was like the trademark stuff were coming out. Yeah.
and they had the mobile idea in their head. They were like, oh, let's just make a mobile Chocobo game.
Yeah, why not? I mean, let's just really get that mobile stuff going. All right, so Chocobo GP, unlikely. I just kind of wanted to bring it up there just in case if it is announced and they can be like, hey, we saw that on Final Fantasy TV. They said something about that. So let's switch on over since we are on Final Fantasy topic right now, and we'll probably revisit this when we talk about Xbox in just a little bit. So I'm actually going to talk about a Final Fantasy presence at the Xbox event. So I think this is the obvious right now. I'm gonna get the obvious out of the way. Maybe not even obvious, I don't know. But it is already announced. Final Fantasy 13 is coming to Game Pass. We know it's coming to Game Pass. But we haven't seen it yet. I think they come out and they say the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy is now on Game Pass. Potentially an FPS boost on it. I don't know. Whatever they want to do to kind of make it exciting. But I think the trilogy is coming to Game Pass and it'll be out soon. If not, like, hey, it's available now. And then talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake. The timed exclusivity is up. Like it's been up for a while. So
Actually, not quite, because it did get renewed another 6 months. We saw in the last in the final trailer for Intergrade, it said it's going to be on PS5 at least 6 months before any other platform.
There
So
okay.
was a bit of nuance to the statement though, because
okay.
it said console exclusivity
Ooh,
for the next 6 months.
out for
Yeah, that was
PC.
yeah. So that
So
that
there,
was the specific wording. So that
yeah.
suggests that it could come to PC within these past 6 months. But what I really think is going to happen is that I can't imagine
Look
them
at this.
releasing the PC version and then releasing the Xbox version last. Normally, the way this type of stuff would
Yeah.
work would be like they'll release the PC and Xbox version at the same time, because then whenever they go to market, it's cheaper to market the game coming to PC and Xbox at the same time than market that it's coming to PS5, then market that it's coming to PC, then market that it's coming to Xbox.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I'm with you on that one. I actually didn't see the whole 6 month after for Intergrade, but that doesn't stop the original, like the last year's version coming to
That'd be
Xbox.
kind of
Like,
lame though if it did, if it was
that'd be
I
just
some atlas.
mean,
PC.
day one Game Pass though would be okay. Like just to say, hey,
Yeah.
you can play it on day one Game Pass. I mean, it would be okay. Xbox players, I'm sure, are just like, I want to play some Final Fantasy VII Remake. Doesn't have to be Intergrade. Just want to play it. I could see that kind of happening. Like, hey, remake coming to Game Pass day one or today or whatever. I don't know. But at the time the exclusivity thing had me thinking that we get to see like Xbox Game Pass and some kind of announcement there.
I got a real time update. I looked up the
Okay.
trailer. It says PlayStation 5 console exclusive. The footnote though says available on PS5 at least 6 months earlier than any other format. So I
Oh,
think
okay.
so. It's still PS5 only for 6 months, and then from
Okay.
there it says PS5 console exclusive. Full
Yeah,
stop.
that's pretty cut and
Which
dry.
is
Yeah, that's pretty cut and dry.
interesting. So does that mean PC and no Xbox, or is it just PS5 console exclusive for now, and then after the
Yeah.
6 months, then it goes to everything else, or just PC? Like that's what I can't wrap my brain around at the moment.
I'm going with it's just like PS5 console exclusive, this console only, and then like Night Sky Prince said, we'll see it on Xbox and Game Pass 6 months from now, maybe. And like it'll be released all at once. It still doesn't stop them from releasing the first like the remake that came out last year. That's where I'm at. I really do feel like
Okay.
the remake
Yeah,
that came
yeah.
out last year, 6 months without or 6 months with the old version is still better than 6 months without it. You know what I mean? Like Xbox
Yeah,
could
yeah.
still use that game. It just depends on Square Enix if they want to kind of do something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it could be possible to see it on Xbox Game Pass. I don't know how the likelihood, if I'm going to do a likelihood meter, I say possible.
I feel
Possible.
like I feel like it would be kind of redundant to release just normal base remake
Yeah.
and then just release 6 months ahead of now is like, oh, Intergrade, you get to, either download it or buy it again, that would
Yep.
feel kind of redundant. I feel like they'd want to push Intergrade because of the quote or the implication that maybe there's some extra stuff included in Intergrade that, part two takes place right after Intergrade.
I got
So
Zombie Nug saying plot twist. PS4 is the other format. Possible, very possible. Actually, that's just another topic in itself. I haven't seen anything as of yet that shows me that that game deserves to be a PS5 exclusive. But we don't have the
yeah,
game, so we don't know. And intermission could show us something completely mind-blowing, and it's like, oh, okay, this is meant to be on PS5 only. But that kind of wraps up our Final Fantasy portion of this prediction show. We're gonna move on to the rest of Square Enix, and like basically everything but Final Fantasy. So before we move on, kind of want to kind of get your guys. Are we good with Final Fantasy? Is there anything else that you wanted to add to Final Fantasy at E3 and Summer Game Fest?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I was gonna comment on that exclusivity thing. It's Square has pretty much like abandoned Xbox like altogether. And I understand like why,
kind of
because,
sucks though.
like it does, but like even like Final Fantasy 15, which sold about 9 million units. If you look at like the sales breakdown, like barely 1 million of those units were on Xbox.
Yeah,
Mm,
And I think that they are just seeing like their partnership with Sony, like what they're making off of their exclusivity deal with Sony is probably more than what they're making selling these games on Xbox, for sure.
that's
I would
true.
say I agree with you, but I have seen a trend with I mean, I guess the trend, but they're starting like they have a lot of I don't know, goodwill with Game Pass.
They
Yeah, I
do.
was gonna
I
say
mean,
that.
Outriders was released day 1 on Game Pass.
Right.
Which is that's insane. That's a big deal to release one of your big
Mhm.
games day 1 on Game Pass. All of the Final Fantasy games are making their way over to Game Pass. So I can kind of I want to say that I agree, but I also kind of want to say that I feel like they're kind of testing the water to see what
Right.
happens with Game Pass. And if that's a like a viable like outlet for their content.
And
Like
they'd be
Right.
getting like an upfront check from Game Pass most likely, right?
oh, you know it too. Like if I
So
was
Mhm.
that
Microsoft,
might be a
I would
better
be paying for that.
proposition than just porting it to Xbox and letting it sell there. Just getting that upfront cash from Microsoft. It'd be like,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll put it on Xbox.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and
I
you
think
better
that'll be the
believe that's what
case.
they did with Outrider.
I think that'll be the case for stuff like their Western titles or for their or for legacy Final Fantasy titles. But I think
Mhm,
for like the main series games, because I mean, look,
mhm.
Final Fantasy 14 is still to this day console exclusive to PlayStation.
Yeah,
Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 remake, and now Final Fantasy Origin,
mhm.
all PS4, PS5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
It's crazy.
I'm actually
Yeah.
on the in the same boat as when the rumors started to like kind of sort of circulating about Xbox like acquiring Square Enix. I kind of was on the same like I was like I bet that is something going on behind the
Yeah.
scenes right now. I bet that's more
Yeah.
than just a rumor.
Mm.
I think Xbox is very much aware that they like that Square, one of the big publishers, is kind of lost faith in the Xbox. And if I'm Phil Spencer, I'm thinking that I'm like going to find a way that I can remedy the situation, try to get them to come over. And the deal fell through, but I imagine that the deal didn't just completely fall through. I imagine that something came out of it. Like I imagine that they're saying, "Hey, we have Game Pass. We can fund some like Outriders, put that on day one.
Mhm.
Let's get that, and that was part of the deal. Like we won't acquire you. You know what I mean? But like,
Yeah.
can you
Yeah.
can you do something for us?
And I
Uh,
believe that Sony was
yeah.
trying to buy them too.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And if I'm Sony, I'm like, well, I win. Yeah, I mean, I've already got a year, 2 years exclusivity. Like,
Mhm.
Sony has won the deal for sure. But I don't feel like I feel like Microsoft's not gonna didn't leave without anything. I feel like they're getting something out of it.
Don and chat
And
brings up a good
yeah,
point. That Outriders, is one thing, and Final Fantasy is a whole nother deal. Outriders,
right.
I don't think that game would have been successful if it was just, a full price game on a shelf. I
They
think
needed to
I
get a
think
player base.
Game Pass helped it significantly, not only for the upfront cost, uh, but also for player base.
Mhm.
So that game kind of needed it.
Yeah.
Where Final Fantasy is going to succeed in some form, right? If it's on PlayStation, the games usually sell millions of copies, and it's a surefire thing. So, yeah,
Right.
that is a valid point to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Night Sky Prince kind of said something similar with like Western titles
Yeah,
being like a Game Pass Xbox support. Yeah, so it's true. I just kind of wanted to throw it out there because I do see like that trend kind of going on with Game Pass. Like at Square Enix, they kind of have a little bit of a little part. They're playing nice. So
and all the old Final
possibly
Fantasy games coming over to Game Pass too. That's been happening
exactly.
constantly. So,
Yeah. So I would be I'd like to see it. I think we could. I think we could. Possible on the possibilities the scale. We're gonna say possible.
yeah.
So that's really all I want to say for Final Fantasy. Let's move on to Square Enix. And thank you so much for sticking with us because we are Final Fan TV and we cover Final Fantasy content. But hey, I'm a gamer. We're all gamers, and we love like video games all together. And if I'm going to be honest with you, this is the kind of stuff that I want to do. Like, so Final Fantasy, love the game, love the franchise, and I will always talk about it. But I want to talk about video games. So let's get